Have you ever watched a strong man crumble not from war? Not from hunger or fire, but from something far more silent, a soft voice, a gentle touch, a smile that seemed innocent but carried venom behind the lips. He didn't fall in battle, he fell in love. And that, right there, is the quiet tragedy of the modern man. There is no peace in a man who bows to madness, no dignity in the one who drinks poison slowly, calling it wine, whispering the word love as it burns him from the inside out. You won't find his story in the news. No one weeps for him. Why? Because he agreed to die quietly, without resistance, without protest, with a soft yes, he gave himself away. Marcus Aurelius never begged. He never gave his soul away for the illusion of affection. He ruled his emotions, his thoughts, and his fate. He didn't chase the storm to feel alive, he mastered it. And what he left behind was not comfort, not poetry, not platitudes. What he left were warnings. You have power over your mind, he wrote. Not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. But today's man has forgotten that lesson. He doesn't just surrender his power, he offers it up on a silver platter to the first woman who knows how to twist a smile into control. He lets her become the storm, the event, the sun, and the moon of his emotional universe. And worse, he calls this romance. So if you're listening now, listen like your life depends on it, because it does. There are 10 behaviors no man should ever tolerate from a woman. Not because he's afraid of being alone, not because he's afraid of losing her, but because the moment he tolerates them, he loses himself. And when a man loses himself, he's no longer in love, he's in chains. 1. Mockery. The rolled eyes. The sarcastic jabs made in front of friends. The passive-aggressive slaps disguised as jokes. She'll embarrass you in public, then laugh it off as if you're being too sensitive. And you afraid to seem weak laugh along, not realizing that every chuckle is a chip away at your soul. Marcus said, "What injures the hive, injures the bee. And what injures your image, your dignity, injures your spirit. A woman who cannot speak of you with reverence should not speak to you at all. If her words cut deeper than any blade, and you let her wield them, you're not building a bond, you're digging a grave for your confidence. One insult at a time." 2. Chaos as normal. She's never calm. Her moods rule the home like a storm without warning. One moment she's warm and loving, the next she's ice. Her anger, a sharpened blade. And you, constantly bleeding. You tell yourself it's just how she is, that it's passion, that it means she cares, but deep down you know better. This isn't love, it's pathology. And still you stay. Marcus Aurelius believed, nowhere can man find a quieter retreat than in his own soul. But a man who shares his bed with a hurricane doesn't retreat, runs. From her, from himself, from the life he once dreamed of. 3. Addiction to attention. There's a woman who lives on validation. She posts her body more than her thoughts. She thrives on likes, replies, and comments from men she'll never meet. She calls it empowerment. But if her value comes from the eyes of strangers, how could she ever truly value the man who sees her soul? You become background noise in her pursuit of public worship. She doesn't want a partner, she wants an audience. Marcus warned us, it is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live. And the man who lives with a woman addicted to attention, he never begins. He's a shadow beside the spotlight she reserves for herself. 4. Sexual manipulation. She gives affection as reward. She withholds it as punishment. Intimacy is no longer a connection, it's a transaction. And you, desperate for warmth, crawl like a beggar to her throne. But love should not be bought. It should never be rationed like currency in a power game. Aurelius preached the value of self-mastery, of detachment, of reining in impulses with reason. Yet, here you are, letting lust dictate your worth. The man who lets his desire rule him is no man, he is a slave, paying indignity for moments of pleasure. Sex is not the enemy. Lust without dignity is. But the worst part is this: the chains aren't always forged in rage or cruelty. Sometimes they're woven with sweetness, subtle words, soft voices, quiet dismissals that chip away at you, piece by piece. In the previous part, we unmasked the venom that hides behind a kiss. Now, we go deeper. Because when her control becomes your cage, and your silence becomes her permission, that's not love. That's surrender. Let's continue with the fifth behavior. No man should ever tolerate contempt for your purpose. She doesn't outright attack your dreams. She just mocks them. She sighs when you speak about your goals. She interrupts your focus with trivial drama. She scoffs at your discipline as if your mission were a child's fantasy. Her support is conditional, given only when your future somehow serves hers. And this, my friend, is not partnership. It's sabotage disguised as companionship. Marcus Aurelius warned, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." But how can you be one when every step you take is met with rolled eyes and ridicule by the one who's supposed to walk beside you? The man who stays with a woman who scorns his mission will eventually wake up in a life sculpted by her desires, where his reflection no longer resembles the man he once hoped to be. We've now crossed 5 of the 10 red lines. And if even one of them echoes in your relationship, this isn't just a checklist, it's a mirror. And the blood you see isn't metaphorical, it's your self-worth, quietly bleeding out behind a smile you've learned to fake. This isn't nobility, this isn't romantic suffering. This is self-destruction, dressed in the scent of her perfume. Marcus Aurelius didn't believe in comfort. He believed in clarity. And truth? Truth is not soft. It does not whisper. It roars. Let's press forward. 6th, the ghost of competition. She doesn't want to stand beside you. She wants to outshine you. Her victories must be louder, her income greater, her beauty noticed more. Her presence dominates the room, not in unity, but in conquest. Everything she achieves, she wears like armor, but not to protect, only to prove she's above you. In public is subtle. A small boast here, a dismissive joke there, but at home, you become the background noise to her self-celebration. She does not share her success. She weaponizes it. Marcus warned, ambition means tying your well-being to what others say or do. But here you are anchored to a woman whose value depends on eclipsing yours. And you, instead of being her man, become her mirror. She loves you only when you reflect her superiority. If you stop shining back what she wants to see, her admiration dies. And so does the illusion of mutual respect. 7th, emotional manipulation masked as trauma. Every harsh word is blamed on her past. Every moment of coldness justified by some invisible scar. She tells you she's healing, but healing doesn't mean harming others. She turns your compassion into guilt. You stop asking for love because she convinces you it's selfish. After all, she's the broken one, right? Wrong. You are no longer her partner. You're her emotional dumping ground, her personal therapist, her confessional booth. She sins and you repent. The deeper she claims to suffer, the more ashamed you feel for needing her warmth. But this isn't healing, it's hijacking. And if you confuse manhood with martyrdom, you'll be crucified by someone who never intended to change. Marcus said, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. But this is not revenge. This is spiritual erosion. Bit by bit, your identity dissolves under the weight of her unresolved history. And she never lifts the burden. 8th, entitlement without accountability. She demands loyalty, affection, financial support, leadership, but gives nothing in return. Her gratitude, extinct. Her demands, endless. You build, she critiques. You provide, she complains. You lead, she resists. Not because you fail, but because her ego cannot accept strength without interpreting it as a threat. She expects to be treated like a queen while acting like a tyrant, and you thinking love means giving more end up with less and less of yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "So other people hurt me? That's their problem. Their actions are not mine." But the man who lets a woman's lack of appreciation define his value is no longer following Stoic wisdom. He's letting someone else's self-importance drag him under. Ninth, boundary testing. This one is insidious. It starts with little things: a secretive text, a white lie, a photo she promised not to post. Not major betrayals, just small acts of defiance. But they're calculated. She knows your lines and tiptoes just past them to see if you'll react. And when you don't, she learns that disrespect is safe. Every test you ignore becomes a game she'll play again and again until your standards become fiction and your silence becomes consent. Marcus warned, if it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it. But what if she does it and you stay? What does that say? You're not just tolerating bad behavior. You're teaching her that it's acceptable, that your values are flexible, that your self-respect is negotiable. And if you followed us this far, you already know it's not about her anymore. It's about you, about the man you're becoming or the one you're losing. We've covered 9. One remains, and it may be the most dangerous of all. Let's finish this together. But after she's crossed every line, broken every boundary, and tested your worth again and again, there's still one thing left: the quiet death of respect. It doesn't come with shouting. It doesn't slam doors. It doesn't leave bruises. It simply fades, like the light in a room no one enters anymore. She stops listening. She no longer meets your eyes when you speak. Your voice becomes background noise in the very home you've built. She's not outwardly cruel. In fact, she may smile. But that's what makes it more dangerous, because this betrayal doesn't scream. It sighs. And a man can survive hate. He can even rise from it. But indifference is a slow poison, and it kills a man from the inside out. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love." But what happens when a man wakes up beside a woman who sees no privilege in his presence? He doesn't rise. He sinks. He stops building. He starts fading. The smile on his face becomes performance. The fire in his chest becomes ashes. These 10 signs we've walked through, they are not opinions. They are not mere complaints. They are not emotional overreactions. They are truths. Realities that too many men overlook because the world has taught them that suffering in silence is somehow noble, that absorbing pain is a form of strength, that tolerating the intolerable is love. But it's not. Each of these 10 patterns is a door, and when left unchecked, each opens into a room where a man's purpose slowly dies, one silent surrender at a time. Most will not see it. Most will dismiss it, because truth offends where lies seduce. But a rare few, those who are still awake, will understand. They will see the truth. Love without respect is not love. It is slavery with a smile. And they will remember what Marcus Aurelius lived for: not validation, not comfort, not applause. He stood for self-rule, for discipline of mind, for the sacredness of peace. Now, with the illusion shattered, what remains is the man himself, raw, maybe wounded, but standing at the edge of a choice. Will he become a tyrant over himself, forcing silence and submission in the name of peace? Or will he become a prisoner, shackled to someone else's chaos, always bending, always breaking? Aurelius called this the battlefield of the soul, and it is here that the war is either won or lost not by her actions, but by your permission. So let me ask you, have you seen these signs? Have you lived them? If so, then the tragedy didn't begin with her behavior. It began the moment you accepted it. Because every betrayal you forgave, every red flag you painted white, every moment you convinced yourself to stay was a moment you buried a part of yourself alive. Marcus said, a man should be upright, not kept upright. But today, too many men are held together by hope that she'll return to who she once was, that things will change, that love will win. But love without truth is a cage. Hope without standards is a trap. And so, he tiptoes through his own life, trying not to upset her. He becomes a weather reader, trained to see the storms in her mood and bend his behavior to avoid lightning. He calls it compromise. But it's not compromise. It's fear. It's emasculation. It's the slow suicide of sovereignty. You were not made to shrink to fit someone else's comfort zone. You were not born to beg for peace in a place that treats your soul like a nuisance. There is no glory in being bulletproof to emotional wounds. You don't win by enduring abuse. That's not toughness. That's delusion disguised as loyalty. True strength isn't saying enough. In walking away with dignity, not because she gave you closure, but because you gave it to yourself. In choosing your own sanity over her next apology. In finally realizing you don't have to set yourself on fire just because she's cold. But here's the twist: this kind of strength. It doesn't come from rage. It doesn't come from revenge. It comes from stillness. From sitting with yourself in the quiet. From remembering who you were before her. From reclaiming the man you buried beneath years of compromise. And that's the very moment Marcus meant when he said, don't waste what's left of your life speculating about others unless it is for mutual benefit. Because what mutual benefit is there in decoding her tone, in negotiating for kindness, embracing yourself before every conversation? That's not love. That's surveillance. That's imprisonment. And when a man becomes a detective in his own relationship, investigating every cold glance, every mood shift, every broken promise he's already lost. But the worst cost isn't emotional. It's not even psychological. It's spiritual. Because when a man betrays himself over and over, eventually there's no one left to come home Tono, even inside his own soul. After a man has become a shadow in his own life, what remains is only one question. How long will he keep pretending this is love? Because when a man tolerates what slowly breaks him, something deep inside begins to rot. His eyes dim like the last embers of a dying fire. His shoulders fold under invisible weight. His laughter fades into silence. His presence becomes a whisper of who he once was. And the worst part? The world doesn't notice. Or worse, it tells him he's the problem. They tell him to try harder, to be more understanding, to open up, as if he hasn't already bent himself into 1,000 twisted shapestring to be enough for a woman who never truly wanted a man, only something she could mold, control, not connection. Marcus Aurelius would have named it exactly what it is, a war. Not one of fists or fire, but of identity. And the only weapon a man has in this war is clarity. Not rage, not revenge, not manipulation, just clarity. Clarity doesn't beg for closure. It doesn't wait for one last apology. It doesn't need permission to walk away. A man who sees clearly doesn't storm out, steps out. He doesn't burn bridges, builds a new path. Calm, measured, unapologetic, and that calm terrifies her. Because she was never afraid of losing him, only of losing her grip. She never imagined he'd see through the game, but he has. And now, clarity moves him in silence. But what comes after clarity? That's where most men struggle. Once he sees the truth, he's left standing in ruins, empty, hollowed out. The life he built now feels foreign, and rebuilding. There's no roadmap, no mentor. The world offers no blueprint for how to put a man back together after he's been drained by years of tolerance disguised as love. But Marcus Aurelius did leave one, a quiet, steady path. And the first step is always the same: silence. Not the silence of defeat, not the silence of collapse, but the silence of awakening. A man doesn't rebuild by screaming. He rebuilds by stopping. Stopping the chasing. Stopping the explaining. Stopping the endless negotiation with someone who was never going to change. He doesn't try to fix what was built to break him. He stops apologizing for needing peace. He stops justifying his boundaries. He stops bleeding for people who drink his pain like wine and then ask for more. This silence isn't retreat, it's resurrection. Because for the first time in a long time, he's not reacting. He's observing. He's measuring. He's choosing. And in that stillness, something powerful returns his presence. Marcus Aurelius lived surrounded by betrayal, death, and endless pressures of empire. And still, he wrote, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water." That's the man who rises from this silence. Not louder, not crueler, but unshakable. He no longer moves to win favor. He moves with alignment. He doesn't explain himself. He doesn't argue. He acts. And when he acts, everything changes. The same silence she once used to punish now becomes his weapon. Not to hurt her, but to free himself. The man who used to fold under her tears now looks right through them. The man who once begged for peace now embodies it. He doesn't plead. He leaves. Not with a bang, but with a door closing that never reopens. And in that final step, she sees the man she never thought he'd become. Not a monster, not a tyrant, but a man awakened. And awakened men cannot be seduced by manipulation. They cannot be pulled by guilt, because they've tasted the cost, and they've returned to the path Marcus Aurelius walked, the path of internal command. His mornings are no longer chaotic. They begin with discipline. His words are fewer, but each one carries weight. His time is guarded like treasure. He reads more than he scrolls. He builds more than he begs. He retreats not to sulk, but to sharpen. The world might call it cold, but the world does not understand kingship. And in time, the scars fade, the cravings vanish. The fantasies of her return dissolve into clarity, because he's touched the bottom and climbed back. And once a man has rebuilt himself from ruin, he will never trade that empire to sit in another woman's audience. He no longer looks back, not out of pride, but out of wisdom. And this is where the journey ends, not with revenge, not with bitterness, but with sovereignty. Marcus Aurelius asks one question every man must write on his mirror. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. That power, it's yours now. Don't give it away again. And now, as the man stands in the silence of his own clarity, a new day begins, not just on the clock, but in the soul. Because the next chapter doesn't start with her absence, but with his presence fully returned to himself. At dawn, when the weight of life tries to keep him curled under the covers, he reminds himself of one thing: I have to go to work as a human being, not to chase, not to please, not to convince anyone of his worth, but to build, to protect, to return to the sacred fire of self-mastery. That fire, once dimmed by manipulation and neglect, now burns brighter than ever. And no woman, no matter how enchanting, how beautiful, how wrapped in memories, worth extinguishing it again. This is where wounds are forged into weapons, where pain gives birth to power, where clarity becomes law, the law that says, no more. A man either returns to his throne, the rightful ruler of his mind, and missionor he stays, forever lost in the fog, bowing to ghosts that never deserved his loyalty. So let this end as Marcus Aurelius would have ended it, with fire, truth, and command. A man who remembers who he is becomes untouchable, not because he dominates others, but because he no longer submits to lies. He has walked through the illusion, the one that said love must hurt, that said enduring disrespect made him noble, that called self-abandonment romance. That illusion is shattered now. He knows the good man is not the weak man. He is the man who sees with clear eyes and still chooses discipline over desire, distance over dysfunction, silence over chaos, and peace over performance. He is not dangerous to women. He is not dangerous to the world. He is dangerous to the empire of manipulation that once fed on his confusion. Because clarity ruins the game. He no longer argues, observes. He no longer chases, chooses. He no longer tolerates what drains him, even when it arrives dressed in beauty, nostalgia, or need. Marcus Aurelius never begged for love from the Senate, from his enemies, or from anyone. He ruled, and he wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." So, the modern man reborn now guards his thoughts like a warrior guards his kingdom. No woman lives rent-free in his mind. No memory rules his future. No past pain gets to distort his mission. He understands, finally, not all love is good love. Not all women are innocent. Some are architects of chaos not by accident, but by design. And to keep forgiving what harms you is not compassion, it's masochism. To explain yourself into exhaustion is not love, it's self-abandonment. The world may call him cold now, bitter, closed off. But the world doesn't bleed in his bed at night. The world didn't cry behind the bathroom door, wondering why being kind was never enough. The world didn't live through what he did. But he did. And not anymore. Now he lives by the code of the Stoic. Not numb, but sovereign. Not hateful, but alert. Not reactive, but awake. And should a woman enter his life again, she will feel his presence. She will sense the boundaries not as punishment, but as monuments to a man who refused to break. She will know this is not a man to test. This is a man to honor or leave, because he honors himself. That is the law now. That is the gospel. That is the kingdom rebuilt. And to every man watching, remember this truth. You were not born to suffer in silence. You were not born to shrink to fit someone else's chaos. You were not born to explain your soul into oblivion. You were born to command yourself, to protect your mind, to guard your fire, to master the battlefield of your own thoughts. And when you do, the world doesn't get easier. You get stronger. So remember Marcus Aurelius not just as a philosopher, not just as a Roman emperor, but as a mirror that still reflects the man you were meant to become. And if this message woke something inside you, don't let it fade. Like, share, subscribe, support this channel through the link below, because somewhere out there, another man is still asleep. And you, yes, you, might be the reason he wakes.